Patrice Lumumba, born Isaïe Tasumbu Tawosa, July 2, 1925, was a Congolese politician and independence leader who served as the first Prime Minister of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, then known as the Republic of the Congo, from June until September 1960, following the May 1960 election. Lumumba was the leader of the Congolese National Movement, MNC, from 1958 until his assassination in 1961. Ideologically an African nationalist and Pan-Africanist, he played a significant role in the transformation of the Congo from a colony of Belgium into an independent republic. Shortly after Congolese independence in June 1960, a mutiny broke out in the army, marking the beginning of the Congo crisis. After a coup, Lumumba attempted to escape to Stanleyville to join his supporters, who had established a new anti-Mobutu state called the Free Republic of the Congo. Lumumba was captured en route by state authorities under Joseph Désiré Mobutu, sent to the state of Katanga, and, with the help of Belgian mercenaries, tortured and executed by the separatist Katangan authorities of Moise Tshombe. His body was then dissolved in acid. In 2002, Belgium formally apologized for its role in the execution, admitting moral responsibility, and in 2022, it returned Lumumba's tooth to his family. He is seen as a martyr for the Pan-African movement. Early life and career photograph of Lumumba, circa 1950s. Patrice Lumumba was born on July 2, 1925, as Isaïe Tasumbu Tawosa to Julienne Wamato Lomendja and her husband, François Tolenga Otetshima, a farmer in Onalua, in the Katakokombe region of the Kasai province of the Belgian Congo. He was a member of the Tetela ethnic group, where he was referred to with the name Élias Okit'Asombo. His original surname means heir of the cursed, and is derived from the Tetela words okitá/okitɔ, heir, successor, and asombó, cursed or bewitched people who will die quickly. He had 3 brothers, Charles Lokolonga, Émile Kalema, and Louis Onema Pene Lumumba, and 1 half-brother, Jean Tolenga. Raised in a Catholic family, he was educated at a Protestant primary school, a Catholic missionary school, and finally the government post office training school, where he passed the 1-year course with distinction. He was known for being a vocal, precocious young man, regularly pointing out the errors of his teachers in front of his peers. This outspoken nature would come to define his life and career.
L'indépendance du Congo constitue l'aboutissement de l'œuvre conçue par le génie du roi Léopold II, entreprise par lui avec un courage tenace et continuée avec persévérance par la Belgique. Elle marque une heure décisive dans les destinées non seulement du Congo lui-même, mais je n'hésite pas à l'affirmer, de l'Afrique tout entière.
Lumumba spoke Tetela, French, Lingala, Swahili, and Tshiluba. Outside of his regular studies, Lumumba took an interest in the Enlightenment ideals of Jean-Jacques Rousseau and Voltaire. He was also fond of Molière and Victor Hugo. He wrote poetry, and many of his works had anti-imperialist themes. He worked as a traveling beer salesman in Léopoldville and as a postal clerk in Stanleyville for 11 years.
L'indépendance du Congo constitue l'aboutissement de l'œuvre conçue par le génie du roi Léopold II, entreprise par lui avec un courage tenace et continuée avec persévérance par la Belgique. Elle marque une heure décisive dans les destinées, non seulement du Congo lui-même, mais je n'hésite pas à l'affirmer, de l'Afrique tout entière.
Lumumba was married 3 times. He married Henriette Malatawa a year after arriving in Stanleyville. They divorced in 1947. In the same year, he married Hortense Sombosia, but this relationship also fell apart. He began an affair with Pauline Key. While he had no children with his first 2 wives, his relationship with Key resulted in a son, François Lumumba. though he remained close with Key until his death. Lumumba ultimately ended their affair to marry Pauline Opangu in 1951. In the period following the Second World War, after his release, Lumumba helped found the Mouvement National Congolais, MNC party in 1958 and quickly became the organization's leader. The MNC, unlike other Congolese parties developing at the time, did not draw on a particular ethnic base. It promoted a platform that included independence, gradual Africanization of the government, state-led economic development, and neutrality in foreign affairs. Lumumba had a large popular following, and as a result, he had more political autonomy than contemporaries who were more dependent on Belgian connections. Lumumba was one of the delegates who represented the MNC at the All-African People's Conference in Accra, Ghana, in December 1958. At this international conference, hosted by Ghanaian President Kwame Nkrumah, Lumumba further solidified his Pan-Africanist credentials. Nkrumah was personally impressed by Lumumba's intelligence and ability. In 1959, the MNC split into the majority MNCL, led by Lumumba, and the more radical and federalist MNCK. In late October 1959, Lumumba, as leader of the MNC, was arrested for inciting an anti-colonial riot in Stanleyville, during which 30 people were killed. He was sentenced to 6 months in prison. The trial's start date of January 18, 1960, was the first day of the Congolese Roundtable Conference in Brussels, intended to make a plan for the future of the Congo. Despite Lumumba's imprisonment, the MNC won a convincing majority in the December local elections in the Congo. As a result of strong pressure from delegates upset by Lumumba's trial, he was released and allowed to attend the Brussels conference. Citation needed: independence and election as Prime Minister. See also 1960 Belgian Congo general election and formation of the Lumumba government. Lumumba pictured in Brussels at the Round Table Conference with other members of the MNCL delegation, 26th of January 1960. The conference culminated on 27th of January 1960 with a declaration of Congolese independence. It set 30th of June 1960 as the independence date, with national elections to be held from 11 to 25 May 1960. The MNC won a plurality in the election. 6 weeks before the date of independence, Walter Ganshof van der Meersch was appointed as the Belgian Minister of African Affairs. He lived in Leopoldville, in effect becoming Belgium's de facto resident minister in the Congo, administering it jointly with Governor-General Hendrik Cornelis. He was charged with advising King Baudouin on the selection of a formateur. On June 8, 1960, Ganshof flew to Brussels to meet with Baudouin. He made 3 suggestions for formateur: Lumumba, as the winner of the elections; Joseph Kasavubu, the only figure with a reliable national reputation who was associated with the coalescing opposition; or some to be determined third individual who could unite the competing blocs. Ganshof returned to the Congo on June 12, 1960. The following day, he appointed Lumumba to serve as the delegate, informateur, tasked with investigating the possibility of forming a national unity government that included politicians with a wide range of views, with June 16, 1960 as his deadline. The same day as Lumumba's appointment, the parliamentary opposition coalition, the Cartel d'Union Nationale, was announced. Though Kasavubu was aligned with their beliefs, he remained distanced from them. The MNCL was also having trouble securing the allegiances of the PSA, Serea, Centre de Regroupement Africain, and Balubakat, Association Générale des Baluba du Katanga. Initially, Lumumba was unable to establish contact with members of the cartel. Eventually, several leaders were appointed to meet with him, but their positions remained entrenched. On June 16, 1960, Lumumba reported his difficulties to Ganshof, who extended the deadline and promised to act as an intermediary between the MNCL leader and the opposition. Once Ganshof had made contact with the cartel leadership, he was impressed by their obstinacy and assurances of a strong anti-Lumumba polity. By evening, Lumumba's mission was showing even less chance of succeeding. Ganshof considered extending the role of informateur to Cyril Adula and Kasavubu, but faced increasing pressure from Belgian and moderate Congolese advisors to end Lumumba's assignment. The following day, on the 17th of June 1960, Gonshof declared that Lumumba had failed and terminated his mission. Acting on Gonshof's advice, Baudouin then named Kasavubu formateur. Lumumba responded by threatening to form his own government and present it to Parliament without official approval. 29. He called a meeting. He assumed that he would secure the presidency, so he began looking for someone to serve as his prime minister. Most of the candidates he considered were friends who had foreign support similar to his own, including Albert Kalonji, Joseph Ileo, Cyril Adula, and Justin Bomboko. Kasavubu was slow to come to a final decision. On June 18, 1960, Kasavubu announced that he had completed his government with all parties except the MNCL. That afternoon, Jason Sendwi, Antoine Gizenga, and Aniset Kashimura announced in the presence of Lumumba that their respective parties were not committed to the government. The next day, on June 19, 1960, Gonshof summoned Kasavubu and Lumumba to a meeting so they could forge a compromise. This failed when Lumumba flatly refused the position of prime minister in a Kasavubu government. The following day, on June 20, 1960, the two rivals met in the presence of Adula and diplomats from Israel and Ghana, but no agreement was reached. Most party leaders refused to support a government that did not include Lumumba. The decision to make Kasavubu the formateur was a catalyst that rallied the PSA, CEREA, and Balubakat to Lumumba, making it unlikely that Kasavubu could form a government that would survive a vote of confidence. When the chamber met on 21 June 1960 to select its officers, Joseph Kasongo of the MNCL was elected president with 74 votes, a majority, while the two vice presidencies were secured by the PSA and CEREA candidates, both of whom had the support of Lumumba. 29. With time running out before independence, Baudouin took new advice from Gonshof and appointed Lumumba as formateur. Once it was apparent that Lumumba's bloc controlled parliament, several members of the opposition became eager to negotiate for a coalition government in order to share power. By June 22, 1960, Lumumba had a government list, but negotiations continued with Jean Bolikongo, Albert Delvaux, and Kasavubu. Lumumba reportedly offered the alliance of Bakongo, Abaco, the ministerial positions for foreign affairs and middle classes, but Kasavubu instead demanded the Ministry of Finance, a Minister of State, the Secretary of State for the Interior, and a written pledge of support from the MNCL and its allies for his presidential candidacy. Kalonji was presented with the agriculture portfolio by Lumumba, which he rejected, although he was suitable due to his experience as an agricultural engineer. Adula was also offered a ministerial position, but refused to accept it. By the morning of June 23, 1960, the government was, in the words of Lumumba, practically formed. At noon, he made a counteroffer to Kasavubu, who instead responded with a letter demanding the creation of a 7th province for the Bakongo. Lumumba refused to comply, and instead pledged to support Jean Bolikongo in his bid for the presidency. At 1445, Lumumba presented his proposed government before the press. Neither the Abaco nor the MNC Kalonji, MNCK, were represented among the ministers, and the only PSA members were from Gizenga's wing of the party. The Bakongo of Leopoldville were deeply upset by their exclusion from Lumumba's cabinet. They subsequently demanded the removal of the PSA-dominated provincial government and called for a general strike to begin the following morning. At 1600, Lumumba and Kasavubu resumed negotiations. Kasavubu eventually agreed to Lumumba's earlier offer, though Lumumba informed him that he could not give him a guarantee of support in his presidential candidacy. The resulting 37-strong Lumumba government was very diverse, with its members coming from different classes, different tribes, and holding varied political beliefs. Though many had questionable loyalty to Lumumba, most did not openly contradict him out of political considerations or fear of reprisal. At 2240, on 23 June 1960, the Chamber of Deputies convened in the Palais de la Nation to vote on Lumumba's government. After Kasongo opened the session, Lumumba delivered his main speech, promising to maintain national unity, abide by the will of the people, and pursue a neutralist foreign policy. It was warmly received by most deputies and observers. Lumumba waving to supporters, circa 1960, the chamber proceeded to engage in a heated debate. Though the government contained members from parties that held 120 of the 137 seats, reaching a majority was not a straightforward task. While several leaders of the opposition had been involved in the formative negotiations, their parties as a whole had not been consulted. Furthermore, some individuals were upset that they had not been included in the government and sought to personally prevent its investiture. In the subsequent arguments, multiple deputies expressed dissatisfaction at the lack of representation of their respective provinces and/or parties, with several threatening secession. Among them was Kalonji, who said he would encourage people of Kasai to refrain from participating in the central government and form their own autonomous state. One Katangi's deputy objected to the same person being appointed as premier and as head of the defense portfolio. When a vote was finally taken, only 80 of the 137 members of the chamber were present. Of these, 74 voted in favor of the government, 5 against, and 1 abstained. The 57 absences were almost all voluntary, though the government had earned just as many votes as when Kasongo won the presidency of the chamber. The support was not congruent. Members of Cleophas Kamitatu's wing of the PSA had voted against the government, while a few members of the PNP, Puna, and Abaco voted in favor of it. Overall, the vote was a disappointment for the MNCL coalition. The session was adjourned at 2:05 on June 24, 1960. The Senate convened that day to vote on the government. There was another heated debate, in which Ileo and Adula expressed their strong dissatisfaction with its composition. Confederation of Tribal Associations of Katanga, CONACAT, members abstained from voting. When arguments concluded, a decisive vote of approval was taken on the government. 60 voted in favor, 12 against, while 8 abstained. All dissident arguments for alternative cabinets, particularly Kalonji's demand for a new administration, were rendered impotent, and the Lumumba government was officially invested. With the institution of a broad coalition, the parliamentary opposition was officially reduced to only the MNCK and some individuals. At the onset of his premiership, Lumumba had 2 main goals: to ensure that independence would bring a legitimate improvement in the quality of life for the Congolese, and to unify the country as a centralized state by eliminating tribalism and regionalism. He was worried that opposition to his government would appear rapidly and would have to be managed quickly and decisively. To achieve the first aim, Lumumba believed that a comprehensive Africanization of the administration, in spite of its risks, would be necessary. The Belgians were opposed to such an idea, as it would create inefficiency in the Congo's bureaucracy and lead to a mass exodus of unemployed civil servants to Belgium, whom they would be unable to absorb into the government there. It was too late for Lumumba to enact Africanization before independence. Seeking another gesture that might excite the Congolese people, Lumumba proposed to the Belgian government a reduction in sentences for all prisoners and an amnesty for those serving a term of 3 years or less. Gonshoff feared that such an action would jeopardize law and order, and he evaded taking any action until it was too late to fulfill the request. Lumumba's opinion of the Belgians was soured by this affair, which contributed to his fear that independence would not appear real to the average Congolese. In seeking to eliminate tribalism and regionalism in the Congo, Lumumba was deeply inspired by the personality and undertakings of Kwame Nkrumah and by Ghanaian ideas of the leadership necessary in post-colonial Africa. He worked to seek such changes through the MNC. Lumumba intended to combine it with its parliamentary allies, Syria, the PSA, and possibly Balubakar, to form one national party and to build a following in each province. He hoped it would absorb other parties and become a unifying force for the country. The independence ceremony for the Congo, held on June 30th, 1960, at which Lumumba delivered his independence speech. Independence Day was celebrated on June 30th, 1960, in a ceremony attended by many dignitaries, including King Baudouin of Belgium and the foreign press. Baudouin's speech praised developments under colonialism, his reference to the genius of his great-granduncle Leopold II of Belgium, glossing over atrocities committed during his reign over the Congo Free State. The king continued, "Don't compromise the future with hasty reforms, and don't replace the structures that Belgium hands over to you until you are sure you can do better. Don't be afraid to come to us. We will remain by your side, give you advice." Lumumba, who had not been scheduled to speak, delivered an impromptu speech that reminded the audience that the independence of the Congo had not been granted magnanimously by Belgium. For this independence of the Congo, although being proclaimed today by agreement with Belgium, an amicable country with which we are on equal terms, no Congolese worthy of the name will ever be able to forget that it was by fighting that it has been won. A day-to-day fight, an ardent and idealistic fight, a fight in which we were spared neither privation nor suffering, and for which we gave our strength and our blood. We are proud of this struggle, of tears, of fire, and of blood, to the depths of our being, for it was a noble and just struggle, and indispensable to put an end to the humiliating slavery which was imposed upon us by force. Most European journalists were shocked by the stridency of Lumumba's speech. 57. The Western media criticized him. Time magazine characterized his speech as a vicious attack. Prime Minister independent U.S. government documents. In the early 21st century, declassified documents revealed that the CIA had plotted to assassinate Lumumba. The documents indicate that the Congolese leaders who overthrew Lumumba and transferred him to the Katangan authorities, including Mobutu Sese Seko and Joseph Kasavubu, received money and weapons directly from the CIA. 170. 185. The same disclosure showed that, at the time, the U.S. government believed that Lumumba was a communist and feared him because of what it considered the threat of the Soviet Union in the Cold War. However, later intelligence assessments show that Lumumba was not aligned with the Soviet bloc, and that fears of communist expansion in Congo were largely exaggerated. In 2000, a newly declassified interview with Robert Johnson, who was the minute keeper of the U.S. National Security Council at the time in question, revealed that Eisenhower had said something to CIA Chief Allen Dulles to the effect that Lumumba should be eliminated. The interview from the Senate Intelligence Committee's inquiry on covert action was released in August 2000. In 2013, the U.S. State Department admitted that Eisenhower discussed plans at a NSC meeting on August 18, 1960, to assassinate Lumumba. 188. However, documents released in 2017 revealed that an American role in Lumumba's murder was only under consideration by the CIA. CIA Chief Allen Dulles had allocated $100,000 to accomplish the act, but the plan was not carried out. United Kingdom involvement. In June 2001, newly discovered documents by De Witte revealed that while the US and Belgium actively plotted to murder Lumumba, the British government secretly wanted him got rid of because they believed he posed a serious threat to British interests in the Congo, such as mining facilities in Katanga. Howard Smith, who was to become head of MI5 in 1979, said, "I can see only two possible solutions to the problem. The first is the simple one of ensuring Lumumba's removal from the scene by killing him. This should solve the problem." In April 2013, in a letter to the London Review of Books, British parliamentarian David Leah reported having discussed Lumumba's death with MI6 officer Daphne Park shortly before she died in March 2010. Park had been posted to Leopoldville at the time of Lumumba's death and was later a semi-official spokesperson for MI6 in the House of Lords. According to Leah, when he mentioned the uproar surrounding Lumumba's abduction and murder and recalled the theory that MI6 might have had something to do with it, Park replied, "We did. I organized it." The BBC reported that subsequently, Whitehall sources described the claims of MI6 involvement as speculative. Secretary General Dag Hammarskjöld frequently coordinated anti-Lumumba strategies with both the United States and the United Kingdom, reflecting broader Western alignment against Lumumba under the guise of UN neutrality. Reactions to his death. Lumumba's assassination sparked protests in at least 20 countries, including Belgium, the United Kingdom, Ghana, China, Venezuela, and the United States, demonstrating his rapid emergence as a global symbol of the anti-colonial struggle. Within Congo, Lumumba's afterlife became politically charged. Student organizations, church leaders, and nationalist activists invoked his image to contest neo-colonial structures and demand political reform. Repatriation of his remains. The mausoleum of Patrice Lumumba was inaugurated in 2022 in Kinshasa at the Place de l'Échangeur. On 30 June 2020, Lumumba's daughter, Julienne Lumumba, appealed directly in a letter to Philippe, King of the Belgians, the return of the relics of Patrice Emery Lumumba to the ground of his ancestors, describing her father as a hero without a grave. The letter stated, "Why, after his terrible murder, have Lumumba's remains been condemned to remain a soul forever wandering, without a grave to shelter his eternal rest?" 199. On September 10, 2020, a Belgian judge ruled that Lumumba's remains, which then consisted of just a single gold-capped tooth — Gerard Swete had lost the other tooth of Lumumba between 1999 and 2020 — must be returned to his family. 200. In May 2021, Congolese President Félix Tshisekedi announced that there would be a repatriation of the last remains of Lumumba. However, the handover ceremony was delayed because of the COVID-19 pandemic. On June 9, 2022, during a speech in the DRC to the country's parliament, King Philippe reiterated regrets for Belgium's colonial past in its former colony, describing Belgian rule as a regime of unequal relations, unjustifiable in itself, marked by paternalism, discrimination, and racism that led to violent acts and humiliations. On June 20th, Lumumba's children received the remains of their father during a ceremony at Egmont Palace in Brussels, where the federal prosecutor formally handed custody to the family. The Belgian Prime Minister, Alexander De Croo, apologized on behalf of the Belgian government for his country's role in Lumumba's assassination. For my part, I would like to apologize here, in the presence of his family, for the way in which the Belgian government influenced the decision to end the life of the country's first prime minister. A man was murdered for his political convictions, his words, his ideals, he added. Later, the full-sized coffin was brought out in public and draped in the Congolese flag for the Congolese and wider African diaspora of Belgium to pay their respects before the return. A special mausoleum was built in Kinshasa to house his remains. The government of the Democratic Republic of the Congo declared 3 days of national mourning. The burial coincided with the 61st anniversary of his famous Independence Day speech. An investigation by Belgian prosecutors for war crimes related to Lumumba's murder is ongoing. His remains were laid to rest 30 June 2022. On 18 November 2024, the mausoleum was vandalized and Lumumba's coffin broken, with the Interior Ministry saying that his tooth was safe.